Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
It's good to see each and every one of you.
It's good to see you.
Praise the Lord for the Queen of Shabbat. Let it be that we abide in remembrance of the indweller. The remembrance that we live and move and have our being in the One, and have never been separate from the One. Let us in this remembrance return and be one. Amen.
Amen.
So I was thinking about the suffering of the Lord this morning. I was thinking about a swirl from the Acts of John with this light presence speaking to Yohanan the Beloved, John, who's run from the cross in the agony of watching all of it, gone into a cave, Mount of Olives, and is praying and weeping bitterly, and all of a sudden, here's this light presence with him, Mashiach, beginning to speak mysteries of this cross. And this thing of this presence is essentially saying, would you think I'm suffering? I am not suffering. Yet I am suffering. Those who say I suffered, they do not understand. They will be wrong. Those who say I did not suffer, they don't understand. They would be wrong. And this, yes, but if I suffer, what I suffer is a mystery. It's just interesting, this suffering of the Lord. Now, I would like to explain why. So, so suppose an individual actually realized this oneness with God, in God, that is spoken about in the strict path. And this reintegration with his light presence, light power. In the middle of that, in whatever that initial breakthrough would be, I'm sure one would be certain everybody wants it. Like the whole play of light transmission and this good news of innate oneness. And I know that when Jesus came out of the desert, he did. The Gospel of John actually teaches that. So, he comes out of the desert, Mom encourages him to set everything in motion. First miracle, wedding feast of Canaan in that gospel. And then, off goes the ministry, and it's collecting lots of people, gathering people in. And, he feeds thousands, and they're following. And as long as he's a psychic and a magician, a prophet and wonder worker, and not the Mashiach, right? And doesn't talk about this enlightenment or self-realization or oneness or, that magical and psychic part is cool. Some prophecy and wonder working, but this thing with oneness, no, we don't. And so it goes along, and it's really funny because at a certain point when he actually begins to speak his heart of what he's bringing out of that wilderness and out of that baptism, they don't want it. They leave. And the funny thing is he goes to see the person who got it all started, Mom, his mother, He goes up to hometown and family as he's contemplating, oh, I guess not that many do want it. Here's the suffering of the Lord. How painful would it be to know the truth of this oneness, and to see so many suffering in two-ness and an illusion of separation. How painful would that be? And how about if in that oneness there's this interesting empathy and stuff, and in this compassion piece where like one's feeling all of the suffering, the pain of this lost and wandering of countless sentient beings in this unenlightened condition, in this illusion of separation, this forgetfulness, struggling. Now we might be getting into the mystery of the suffering of the Lord. See, because in two-ness, when we go and start talking about the suffering of the Lord, it will be all about the Lord, except for the Lord, it's all about us. Feeling the suffering of all of us. You see. And that's where some Orthodox and Catholic churches get a thing wrong with over-focusing on that crucifixion and the stations of the cross and so on. They're missing something. They're missing the real suffering of the Lord. But let me bring this a little bit deeper home for you. So, for example, in straight path teaching, it is said, seek to see with God, hear with God, feel with God, and smell and taste and touch with God. Let your body be as the body of God. Your heart is the heart of God. Your mind is the mind of God. Your soul is the soul of God. Seek to see and hear and feel with God. Perhaps that very phrasing is a deception. If I may, with God's help and a movement of the Holy Spirit, may I explain. If my very existence, being, consciousness, life, light, emanates from the infinite one, eternal one, holy one, is inseparable from infinite one, eternal one, holy one, is in fact a manifestation of, being an emanation of, whether recognized and realized or not, whether clear or not, whether we are aware or not. But now, isn't your seeing God seeing, hearing God hearing, feeling God feeling, smelling, tasting, touching, God smelling, tasting, touching, sitting, God sitting, standing, God standing, walking, God walking, bathing, God bathing, going to sleep, God going to sleep, waking up, God waking up, feeling something? What if God is in your pleasure and in your pain? Feeling the pleasure, feeling the pain. As you feel the pleasure, you feel the pain. Or the joy, the sorrow. or the good or evil, light or darkness, living or dying. All of it. Now we're getting into the suffering of the Lord. Because whether enlightened or unenlightened, if indeed our existence comes from that true existence that is God Most High, the infinite, the eternal, then in all of this, all of the experience is being experienced by the One. And by you and me. By the One. See, we keep thinking, oftentimes in kind of a two-ness, like oneness is attained, achieved. But what if it's an innate truth? Just is. Now, of course, in the two-ness and in the divisiveness between an inner and an outer self, if you will, a lower and a higher self, if you will, in these aspects of soul, where we end up as two in ourselves, and this illusion of separation. As a relative reality, there's an experience of separation and the forgetfulness. And God is in that experience. So unenlightened condition as well. As enlightened condition of clarity. In the unenlightened condition, yeah, suppose there are distortions in the seeing and the hearing and the feeling, and there are these sufferings and so on, if I'm making some sense. Yet nevertheless, it's not achieved, attained. Rather, it's recognized, it's realized, and it's a present reality. This exercise of seeing with God, hearing with God, feeling with God is about remembering. See, it's about that practice of remembering in a presence of awareness of a truth. A present truth. That remains true even when we forget. It's still true. We're still seeing, hearing, and feeling. And God is our seeing, hearing, feeling, smelling, tasting, touching power. Our existence, our being, our light, our intelligence, you name it, our all in all. And this has to do with deep mysteries, certainly for mystics and Gnostics in Christ and Mashiach, with regards to mysteries of the crucifixion, mysteries of the cross. First, many have over-fixated on the Lord on the cross. Not that one shouldn't tune in to that self-offering and those things done, opening one's heart and mind, and having a bit of awe and wonder at the whole sacrifice, that self-offering of this perfect tzaddik, perfect righteous one, Mashiach. Yes. But the purpose, twofold. Forgiveness of sin and a very radical revelation of our innate oneness with God Most High. And why is forgiveness of sin important? What if we understand that it's all this surface stuff that keeps us from recognizing God is the seeing and the hearing and the feeling? See? Where we get all kind of trapped in our ego grasping, our self grasping. This little self, as though this little self is separate from that higher self. There really is one self. We just kind of break it up, is what I'm trying to say, and become two. Then all of a sudden aren't aware of who and what we are in God, aren't aware of our divine self, aren't aware of our holiness Shema. Nevertheless, the holiness Shema is within and behind and through all of the time. But unfortunately not in our experience. And that's that forgiveness piece actually, is that release of all that so one can accept this grace, this wonder of this innate oneness, so that one can remember, because that's that resurrection piece. The cross brings to this radical resurrection, so that people present could really see, hear, feel this of, oh my gosh, there is a God. And this reality isn't as it seems. God. Pointing at the Master indeed. But watch 3 fingers pointing back. Oh. God. Oh. And this oneness. This most intimate communion. God not way up there, here. Nearer to us than we are to ourselves, as we are in ourselves. And this isn't an ego thing, this is just a true thing. And it's not just a human thing. This would be true of a dog, a turtle, a tree. You name it. No wonder mystics talk about all creatures as veils and faces of the one. Yeah. The one seeing, the one hearing, the one smelling, the one tasting. And this is what cross is about. This is what cross is about. A vehicle showing. And it does take us back to that conversation the other Shabbat where we're saying, sometimes it's really good to put yourself in there like you didn't know nothing of the gospel. You were one of the disciples watching this. And everything, what that full body experience would be. And how that changes one's understanding of the mystery. Of feeling the cross and feeling the resurrection and feeling this and bringing it home with oneself. So again, God is the seeing and the hearing and the smelling and the tasting and the touching. Listening, hearing, speaking. Here's the faith. And as Yeshua said, keep awake. Keep awake. Keep awake and realize that this loving one another is loving God. And let it be said for the record, we are not saying, you are God. You are God, not God. That's the reality of things. You are God, not God. How about that? And so is the person across the street. And. So, I'll pause there and see how this is stirring in.
Keep going back to this idea of forgiveness and focusing on the cross of light instead of the cross of wood, because that saying where he says, you who are heavy burdened, come to me, my yoke is easy, my burden is light. If we see that as a cross, as laying our burdens at the cross, or our personal history at the cross, and taking up this person of light on the cross, that seems to be this message of forgiveness.
Yes, but two things. One, when we realize truly, God most day, all gracious, all merciful, all compassionate, all forgiving, completely. If only we will turn to be one. Now perhaps we can see and hear and feel clear, because otherwise we're getting all wrapped up in all these karmic patterns and this error and that error. And very frequently, let it be said, we are transforming our sins into something bigger than Mount Everest, you know? Like, seriously, we get so fixated. We're veritably thinking of ourselves like Adolf Hitler or a Pol Pot, you know, like we really did anything like that, which we haven't. Feel? It gets very odd, but we get all caught up in that, just like we do. We get caught up in all kinds of things in the world that we think are important that aren't, and worry and fret, and Yeshua speaks to that too. So there's something about this forgiveness, though, that releases all that energy to let us just be, and perhaps receive this word. Perhaps actually recognize, realize this innate oneness with God and Moshe. Feeling? But, second part, receiving this forgiveness is also forgiving others. Yeshua makes that clear, and experientially it is clear for us. Not forgiving others then usually means hanging on to stuff myself. And not receiving my forgiveness, not believing that there's this forgiveness, really. It's done now. And here we are, in the one, returning to be one. We need that. So it's receiving that forgiveness and giving that forgiveness we receive to one another. And somewhere there is this big opening energetically to the one, that everything is to the one, for the one, from the one. All in one. Whether awake or asleep, whether remembering or forgetful, same truth. And besides, when you forgive another, you are forgiving yourself. You're in them, and they're in you. Not so separate. You get a sense that it's concepts, emotions, so on, that actually somehow, distort the seeing, hearing, more or less. And these concepts that prevent this just being in the simple recognition of the one in just being.
It's reminding me of the whole story of the serpents in the wilderness and these poisonous serpents fighting the Israelites in this direction to Moshe to uplift the serpent. And then, of course, we know Yeshua likens himself to the serpent uplifted in the wilderness. it's just striking me in this moment of just that simple shift from the fixation to a bigger picture of what's really happening. And I just love that becomes the guidance to shift the situation. And how many things in life are that.
I'm intrigued by an esoteric interpretation of that passage from chapter 21 of Numbers, where the children of Israel are getting bitten by these fiery serpents and dying. Of course, Moshe goes before the presence of the Holy One. What is to be done? And it's so funny because he's given a commandment to break a commandment. He's given a commandment to authority to breach the second commandment, make an image of something, put it up on a pole, and then go out and tell everybody, anyone who is bitten, who goes and looks up at this, will be healed. And he's blameless. It's a commandment to preach the commandment, which is interesting. We'll leave it aside for a moment. But in esoteric interpretation, this frequently talks about initial awakenings of serpent power in sapphire snake, putting it on a pole, the raising it. And here's an interesting thing. It is very natural in the straight path at a certain point, particularly in the deeper as this recognition of this oneness unfolds. Do you suppose it would be natural for a resurgence of our ego grasping? And that there probably would be a time of, if you will, on the spiritual path, mortal struggle, not to fall into some sort of messianic complex or, right? There would be, as this is unfolding, in a certain stage of its unfolding. Yeah, kind of a perilous time because, well, here we are, there's all of us, who we are in ourselves, and who we are in God, and this self, and coming to understand what that truly is and means in the one. Of course it would be. That's that point, esoterically, in Numbers. The idea of there was some sort of awakening going on. But some were not managing it well. And somehow not fully returning to be one. You see. It's very much like the challenge at the tree of knowledge in the Garden of Eden with the serpent there, with Hava and Adam. Because here they are, they're in the Garden of Eden, they're in this innate oneness, but don't seem to know it. And they're experiencing an intimate communion and conversation, if you will, but aren't recognizing it. So that the serpent can come and veritably promise, well, if you eat of this fruit, you'll become Elohim. You'll become a goddess and God yourself. Ooh. There's the challenge, huh?
Yeah.
And that's the danger of teaching, direct teachings of straight path and Gnostic path sometimes. They can produce us into kind of a titanic ego. Or feeling exclusive when this is the truth of everyone right now, whether it's known or not known. It doesn't make one special in that way. Even if one's aware of it, doesn't make one special. Just having received grace and woken up. And it just happens. So, where are the credits to roll? Feel?
Yeah.
So that moment does tell, of course, the deep mystical teachings do have their dangers too. But it's also true. All reality is a dance of great beauty and great danger. All of it. And that goes all the way through material, astral, spiritual, all of it. So, yeah.
And
There is that.
It's curious that those are the exact temptations Yeshua faces.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know that it's possible not to fall into some of the detours, some, in the struggle. I don't know that that's possible. On the other hand, I also don't know that it would be desirable not to at all. I mean, isn't this bearing light into all these struggles with everyone in the one? Very much like the idea of Zadokim, who literally will descend from their proper state stations into others or grades to uplift, even into Kalipat, even into Hus, interminations, not being overcome by them, and then gathering that in, having capacity to help others overcome. It's the shared journey, and that's part of the suffering of the Lord, isn't it?
Yeah.
That Gnostic gospel of Pistis, Sophia, lovely on the surface, odd in detail, has that interesting message about the risen one, speaking about these three light vestures that were left behind as earthly ministry, has gone to the cross, now in the resurrection, retaking the three light vestures. This leaving these three light vestures and coming and becoming Yeshua, and is that also part of the mysterious suffering? From this reality of Vasplorum, light, three light vestures, light bodies, and then all of a sudden, here this, and this. And this world ruled by this darkness, this forgetfulness, and a lot of suffering. A lot of suffering, sorrow. Oh my. But it's interesting. They don't really go anywhere. They're right there, and you get a sense they're right there and behind them. Wow. He makes a point of saying that. And this is interesting. Is this a journey too of all souls? God, leaving behind the light vestures, this experience, but that's how they're realized?
Yeah, it goes into an insight, this contemplation this morning. It feels like, in a way, crucifixion and resurrection is happening simultaneously. There's this, and that's this mystery of in the world, but not of the world, and that overlapping.
You see, you're onto something. There, sister, by the Holy Spirit, no doubt. So when the Lord talks about not suffering, but suffering, and others not understanding the suffering, not suffering, this is interesting. Is he talking about us looking in tuneness, which is we're very prone to here, and considering all these things in tuneness? Like, for example, we might fixate on the physical suffering and not know that psychic, spiritual, that inward suffering touching into the suffering of countless sentient beings and so on, far more intense than the physical. It runs far deeper. But it's interesting because we're approaching this from space-time point of view and tuneness. What if the Lord, however, has a vision from the eternal realm? in which everything is now. Everything is simultaneous now, well, throughout all time. Meaning there's no past, no future. Everything is now. And this gets interesting. And it gets revealed around the cross. Because as we know, it's commonly taught that that Mashiach descended for 3 days into Gehenna and hell realms to liberate souls from hell realms. Then, of course, there's ascension through heavens, drawing all towards eighth heaven, true kingdom of heaven. Yes. But it says that he descends 3 days, Gehenna. Except there's a little conversation between him and the thief on the cross next to him, the one who got teshuvah, repentance, and invoked the help of the Master, saying, defending him, and then saying, hey, would you pray for me in your kingdom, please? And Yeshua says, today you will be with me in paradise. But, Lord, what about that descent into hell?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, then there's that moment of Magdalene going to embrace him. Do not touch me, for I have not yet ascended to my Father. With the paradise thing, well, okay, maybe the paradise thing isn't ascending to the Father, but it starts getting interesting.
Yeah, indeed.
And it is, obviously a little perplexing from a space-time perspective. It's like, okay, which is it? But when one understands the metadimensional nature of our being, our soul, and that simultaneous actions can be going on at the same time between our neshama, our ruach, our nefesh, just that. But more so, this perspective from eternal realm. There's no contradiction.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's all now. Now, from perspective here, it might seem different than that. But in the one, eternal one, infinite one, no, it's all now. No contradiction. And this is something we find in inwardness ourselves experientially, obviously, in the continuum. Oh, wow, there it is. Simultaneous movements. Maybe not to the radical extent as ultimate Yeshua, but there are these simultaneous movements. All same time. It's different dimensions, different actions. And they are where they are, and yet all one. Something about that. It's like the cross and the resurrection. Isn't it perpetually ongoing with us? Isn't that the intention? Indeed it is. Indeed it is. Mm-hmm.
Am I then hearing that the awareness with which you began the discussion, seeing with God, hearing with God, it suggests, as it's been suggested for many months now, contemplating in this way, that the awareness one is suffering implies that part of us isn't suffering.
Correct.
And the fact that I can be very sick, or very angry, or very confused, or stressed, whatever is the difficulty I'm going through, confused, that means part of me is and part of me isn't.
Correct.
Because the fact that I'm aware of it is somehow transcendental of it. But they can't be separated, but they're not the same.
There are these dimensions of our being. There are these dimensions of our soul. Neshama is tasting it all, and Neshama is transcendent of it all. Yeah? Remember those three roots.
Mm-hmm.
The third root, remember your transcendence. Remember your oneness with Most High. right? It's just like these aspects of God, Father and Mother. One God. Mother designates how God is experiencing all of this within and through us and as us. And Father, of course, designates her transcendence, God's transcendence at the same time. And yes, this is true with us. Absolutely.
He said something very subtle today, that the suffering of the Lord isn't to be limited to the cross, but to the ignorance, the forgetfulness of all living beings who mistake their suffering as separate from the awareness of the Lord's suffering with them.
Well, and isn't the Lord's suffering also their physical suffering?
Mm-hmm.
Not just as night of passion and that cross, but the physical suffering of all beings, all sentient beings, not just human beings.
Mm-hmm.
And the mental emotional suffering, and their spiritual suffering, you feel?
Mm-hmm.
But not just the suffering, there's also all the other aspects of beings too, and experience too, but all of it in the one. You feel?
Mm-hmm.
And again, the first root, God is always with you. Including when it doesn't feel that way, or one's not feeling well, and so on.
So awareness is unconditional.
What do you mean?
There can be awareness in any state of the state.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's why I'm so inspired by Sarah's insight of resurrection, not as a sequence, but concealed by suffering.
And it's very hard to put into a sequence. What was happening in that transfiguration?
Right.
How exactly did that differ from the revelation in resurrection?
Mm-hmm. But we don't separate those moments.
Right. It's like, wow. Then that happened before the cross.
Mm-hmm.
But what's interesting is it was more difficult for individuals to fully receive that revelation than after the cross.
Right.
Somehow the cross put it into context and made it receivable for his friends.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All in a mystery.
Mm-hmm.
But so, and yeah, where's the timetable on that? Because if you're talking about pleroma of life, now you're moving also into eternal realm, meaning those are simultaneous events.
The fact that the heavens tear open at the baptism has always suggested in my heart that really that flash from the primordial universe through the supernal was actually touching down at that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And he had to integrate that. So this resurrection in my heart has been present since the baptism, but it had to be worked out.
Well, that, and look at some of the descriptions around the culmination of the crucifixion.
Mm-hmm.
Of weather-changing earthquakes,
Mm-hmm.
spontaneous arisings of the dead, the rending of the curtains in the temple,
Mm-hmm.
these whole ideas of rending of heavens, earth
Mm-hmm.
in this culmination, and yet you hear a hint of that at the very outset with the baptism. So it is interesting, and this needs to be said because we are very much speaking in terms of the mystical spirituality. Sometimes it can spin our thoughts, and all of a sudden we can think something way out there is being talked about. I would submit, yeah, but if you go with a sense of feeling, you'll get a sense that what we're talking about in this nonlinear quality, we already know. The only problem is when one tries to conceptualize, think about, versus just the sense of feeling. Oh, yeah. Oh, well, yeah, really is like that, not so linear. Experientially, for me, just as it is. You know? So this idea of simultaneous action and so on, this actually isn't foreign to anybody.
Mm-hmm.
inwardly. We have a sense of this. We have an awareness of this. Oh, yeah.
So our access to the transcendence is in the principle of awareness itself, in all states.
And here's this action from the one, to the one, for the one. What I mean is, so in behind, here's this light continuum. And you watch with Yeshua at these different points in the walk in space-time and on the earth, these revelations, these movements, don't you? But in the light continuum, they're all one. And inside the Lord's experience, they're all one in this pleroma of light. Simultaneous. And yet, Yeshua is having the direct experience of walking them through and in space-time. You feel that? And one doesn't contradict the other.
No.
And the funny thing is between our nefesh and our neshama, that inwardly is our reality. This light continuum, and then this continuum, space-time. This turnaround light continuum, and this continuum, space-time. Just is. Perhaps that's a good point of the seal. Until another time, may you abide in the remembrance of no time. May you abide in the remembrance of being one. May you be aware of the divine presence that manifests before you, within you, surrounding you on all sides. As you, I love you. May the peace and grace of our Yahweh Adonai go with you. May you go in the spirit of Yahweh, Eternal One. Sakor Shalom.
Remember peace.